Hi, it's Sam. I'm making this quick video about the recent sort of fervor that has gotten aroused relative to the 13th sign postings and the sign of Ophiucus and these things that have been brought to light relative to your real astrology sign and all of this. I know it's been kind of irritating for some people to answer the questions and whatnot, but it's also, from my point of view, revealed a lot of bad science that the astrologers, not necessarily professional astrologers, but especially a lot of astrology students, engage in when they try to explain the difference between the systems and what's actually going on. And of course, it brings up the age-old, which one's right, which one's wrong, how did it start, what's it all about? So it's a good opportunity to really clarify several things, and it's fascinating. Two things happened almost on the same day last week. Many in the West probably didn't even realize this, but as the Ophiucus debate started here in the West and brought our Western astrology signs into question, am I really a Scorpio because of the 13th sign thing? Concurrent to that, which kind of just flew under the radar for everybody in the Vedic tradition, we had a thing called Makar Sankranti, which literally means the sun entering Capricorn. And this is also an opportunity to clarify something that is not really very clear relative to Vedic astronomy and the Zodiacs. So let's just get into it. I have a picture behind me here. First here, I'm going to talk about Ophiucus, the 13th sign, Makar Sankranti, and a zodiac comparison. So on this diagram, we have this outer square. These are the actual stars, the stellar-based zodiac called the sidereal zodiac, which is based on the fixed constellations in the sky. Constellation of Aries, constellation Taurus, Gemini, etc. This circle is based on the tropical zodiac, which has to do with the Earth going around the sun. And the seasonal zodiac is really a good way to describe it. And as many of you know, based on the precession of the equinoxes, there's a approximately 24-degree difference in the two zodiacs at this point, 23, 24 degrees, based on the precession. And you see, it runs along here. This dotted line is actually this dotted line here is the galactic plane. This is the plane of the galaxy. And it runs along Capricorn and Cancer now. So when we have the changes of direction, when the sun changes direction in the sky right now, it happens along the galactic plane. This is what I described in great detail a couple weeks ago on the videos around the solstice and whatnot. Because now when we have the solstice, which is the sun changing directions in the sky, it's happening when the Earth is passing through the plane of the galaxy, so in its orbit around the sun. That visual alignment occurs as we're having the solstices. Not only Capricorn, but Cancer as well. It's happening on the summer solstice as well. So this is where the plane of the galaxy runs, and the points of tropical Capricorn and Cancer, and this is the other axis. These are the equinox points of Libra and Aries. So this is where the equinoxes happen. So when the Earth hits this is a diagram. This is the sun. This is the Earth going around the sun. So what just happened, and this is the moon going around the Earth. So what just happened on the December 21st, 2010 lunar eclipse that I did the video about is, at that time, the Earth was here and the moon was also here, lined up right in the plane of the galaxy. This is a visual alignment, by the way. It's a visual alignment. It always is. That's what we're talking about. At least when we're measuring the sidereal zodiac, it's relative to precession, which is based on what is behind us. So I'll explain that in a second. But the Earth was here, and then based on what we saw in the sky was the early degrees of Sagittarius and the plane of the galaxy, based on the precession based on the sidereal zodiac, which is the actual stars in the sky. You want to understand that all of this is based on what's called parallax, which is what we see, what's behind these objects. When you use the sidereal zodiac, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, you're basically looking at what is behind the object. So, for instance, right now we have Mars about here. Mars is there. Actually, the way you would represent that, this is what it appears in the sky when we make an astrology chart. But what it actually means is that the orbit of Mars in the sky, Mars is actually, like, let's say this is the orbit of Mars. Mars is actually about right here. You see, it's directly, and it's also directly behind the sun, and that's what's called combustion. That's combust. So Mars is combust right now because visual alignment, he's lost in the rays of the sun. When we see Mars now, we see the stars of Capricorn behind him. In the Vedic astrology tradition, this is very important. We use the stars in the sky. We use the actual bodies of light in the sky and these sections of zodiac. And by the way, these zodiac signs were named thousands of years ago, and thousands of years even before, or at least, we don't know exactly how long, but it was definitely before the Western astrology tradition as well. So they've been around a long time. It's not just since we started practicing tropical astrology that these zodiac signs were named, and that's often said. I'll get into that in a minute. But so just to establish what we're looking at, this is the this is the sidereal placement. So when we look at Mars in the sky, or when we say that Mars is in Capricorn, what we really mean is that based on where we are and the orbit of Mars, the sign of Capricorn is behind. Right now Jupiter is in Pisces in the Vedic, in the sidereal zodiac. That's literally what constellation it's in, and astronomers would say the same thing. It's because Jupiter in his orbit is about right here. You know, it'd be about right here. That's where Jupiter would be in the sky, in his orbit around the sun. So we see it in Pisces. So that's how we do it in the sidereal zodiac. It's based on, or the idea, it's not just some arbitrary idea. The idea is that these sections of sky are ruled by divine forces. There are deities associated with all of these in the nakshatras, and these signs themselves, called rashis, have the character of the planets that rule them. For instance, Gemini is the masculine nature of Mercury. Okay, Cancer is an expression of the moon. This pen is not writing. Okay, well, moon. Leo is the nature of the sun, like the psychological nature, how we feel it. We feel it this way. Virgo is how we feel the feminine quality of Mercury. Libra is how we feel the masculine nature of Venus, etc. So each one of the planets rule these signs. The signs are deeply connected to the planets. It's not just arbitrary where we get to decide what planet rules what sign. The signs themselves are expressions of the planet. This is the feminine nature of Venus. This is the masculine nature of Venus. And the Anahata chakra. This is the masculine nature of Mars. This is the feminine nature of Mars and the Manipura chakra. This is the masculine nature of Jupiter. This is the feminine nature of Jupiter in the Swadhisthana chakra. This is the feminine nature of Saturn. This is the masculine nature of Saturn in the Muladhara chakra, etc. It's all tied to a synergistic system. These are the Vedic sciences. This is how they work. It's all holistic and integrated. That's what the sidereal zodiac is in the Vedic astrological tradition. It's not just some arbitrary thing either, where often tropical astrologers will say, well, but those signs could mean anything. We project those sign names onto these figures, but this or that or this or that. It's different. It's not just based on the way the stars are formed in the sky. There's an energetic relationship and pattern that the rashis, they're not signs either, they're called rashis, which means a heap of energy. There's an energetic and synergistic relationship to these constellations that have direct relationship with the planets, which are called grahas, which grab us and attach us to our karmas, and an entire synergistic system of consciousness, awakening, unfolding, and all the other sciences and all the other Vedic sciences. So you have to realize that when you talk about sidereal astrology and well, I should say when you talk about Vedic astrology and its relationship to the sidereal zodiac, it's not just the stars and their literal. Here's where they are, and this one is this size, and this one's that size. Which, by the way, that's all taken into account when you look at the Vedic Rashis. It tells you the size of it, so you'll see the size. It shows you the size. Getting to the point of this, however, I am getting there. But this is something you should maybe be interested in because it has to do with the sky and the world you live in. And there's a big difference between the Vedic and Western astrological traditions, and both of them have enormous merit. And I'm talking about the Vedic now because I'm mainly talking about this zodiac that exists behind the tropical zodiac, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But this is how the Vedic, this is why the sidereal zodiac is empirical to the Vedic system, because it's not just based on the astronomical reality of the tropical zodiac. It's also based on an entire synergistic system. And this exists at these points which predate even tropical astrology and everything like that. For example, you can see references to this archetypically even in the Bible. They used the same kind of dating that they used in the Vedic tradition, where Vedic would talk about where the precession was, and you'll see things like when the precession was in Kritika, they're linked to the sign of Taurus, and it's referred to in the scriptures that way. But even in Bible, they talk about the age of the calf and the cow, which is Taurus, then the sacrificial lamb, which is related to Aries, and then the time of Jesus. Look at the things with Jesus, walking on water, turning water into wine, all this water imagery, Jonah in the belly of the whale, was the age of Pisces. They're referring to the same things. There's tons of astronomy and there's tons of astrology in the Bible as well. These signs were dated at least 500 to, as far as recorded, at least 500 to 1,000 years before Christ, BC. The two zodiacs lined up around, almost precisely around 100 to 400 AD, based on the best calculations. But, so, I don't want to get too technical, but basically, this is how the sidereal zodiac works. It's the stars in the sky. The whole Ophiucus debate is really related to the sidereal zodiac anyway. Tropical astrologers don't even pay attention to it, and they shouldn't, because as they correctly point out, their zodiac, the tropical zodiac, is based on the seasons and the archetypes. It's an archetypal zodiac. It's nothing to do with the actual stars in the sky. There's nothing wrong with that. So Vedic astrologers need to stop saying that they're doing it wrong. They're not doing it wrong, and tropical astrologers know what they're doing. They know what the zodiac is, they know how it's made, and they understand what it's doing. And it's fine. It's perfect for what it is. As I say, this inner ring has a tropical zodiac, and you have the cardinal points. It's based on the cardinal directions. And it's really important stuff, because the Earth going around the sun is what determines the rhythms of our life on Earth. It's incredibly important. And the vernal equinox, having the archetypal energy of Aries, is beautiful, it's accurate, and it works. The middle of spring, having the archetypal energy of Taurus, works. Just because it doesn't line up with the stars in the sky doesn't matter. In fact, what often is said, and what some even Vedic astrologers think now, is that it sort of worked backwards, that the signs came first, or that the tropical zodiac signs were established, and then we invented the symbol Aries to go with that time of year. These are debates. My feeling is that's not what happened, because there's clear evidence that the named constellations predate Western tropical astrology for sure. But beyond that sort of debate, that rancor, it doesn't even matter at this point. Both zodiacs work, they have merit. In the tropical astrology, though, it's not tied to these signs. What the Ophiucus thing is about is that there's another zodiac sign right here, right at the end of Scorpio. Scorpio is a small Rashi. It exists, a small sign. It exists kind of this way on the ecliptic. It's very high like this. And there's another one right in here called Ophiucus, the serpent bearer. And by the way, in the description, one of the one of the differences in Vedic astrology that they have many more descriptions of things in Vedic text. And one of the things with the signs are the size of the signs. And Scorpio is a slender sign. It says it. And that's the nature of the sign. It's slender. But for tropical astrology, it really doesn't matter because this is their zodiac. This is why I put this ring here. This is their zodiac. It goes here. It's really based on the seasons and when the Earth changes direction, these cardinal points. The cardinal points when the Earth changes direction. This thing is just not working well. When the Earth changes direction, that's what it's based on. So when we have the first degree of winter is based on here when the Earth changes direction in the sky, when the sun changes direction in the sky. And we just had that. That's why, as you see, we just had the winter solstice right here because the Earth going around the sun hit that point when the sun is lowest in the sky. That's what the first day of winter is, because then the sun changes direction right here. Boom. That's the first day of Capricorn. And then the Earth keeps going. In spring, on the first day of spring, when the sun, after moving north, crosses the celestial equator, that's the first day of spring. And that's the first day of Aries. But in the actual star groups, it's going to fall at about 6 degrees of Pisces. The actual stars behind it is 6 degrees Pisces. So the Earth will be in its orbit here when we have the first day of spring, right? And when we look at the sun at that time, this is based on the relationship of the Earth to the sun. When we actually look at the sun that day, the stars are going to be Pisces. But, oops, I have this backwards. I put Aries here. Sorry, you're probably watching that going, why does he have this backwards? This is Aries. Sorry. Aries, and this is Libra. Okay. So, the first day of spring, in the tropical tradition, because it's based on the seasons, happens when on Earth we look back and the sun is, or on Earth when we have the first day of spring, that's the first day of Aries. Okay, that's what they would call Aries, even though the stars of Pisces are behind. And then they would have Taurus about here, you know, falling about here is Taurus. And then about here is Gemini, about 6 degrees all the way around. And you see, then I have Cancer here. These are the cardinal points. That's why I put these, because this is where the directions change. So you have to realize everything there's a stellar relationship we have where there's actual stars behind the planets. Like I mentioned, Mars is actually in Capricorn here. It's actually not in Capricorn. It's just at this point in its orbit based on where we are on our orbit. It's all based on what we see from the Earth. But the stars of Capricorn are behind it, and this is why that's important in the Vedic tradition. Western tradition, they don't look at that. So Western tradition, the Mars went into Aquarius a few days ago. Mars just went into Aquarius because in their zodiac, see, we have Capricorn is here for them, and Aquarius starts about right here for them, because that's based on the tropical zodiac. Now, the way Western astrology does it is from this 0 point of Aries. Basically, they move 30-degree sections east to make the zodiac. Same thing Vedic astrology does. Both zodiac systems are archetypes in one way or another, and you hear it all the time in the tropical astrology tradition or the Western astrology tradition, as the Western astrology scholars have been saying about this Ophiucus. It's not based on the stars. The zodiac is an archetype of energy based on the Earth relationship to the sun and the seasons, and they're right. That's what it is. This is why when you put another sign here for them, it totally doesn't matter. Personally, as a Vedic astrologer, I get asked this question more, because people say, well, Vedic astrology is based on the stars, so what do you have to say about Ophiucus? What I have to say about Ophiucus is it's not the only time where you have other constellations, other named constellations that, by the way, these are not part of the Vedic astronomical tradition, and there's a difference between the named constellations and their archetype in the Vedic world as well, and constellations named in the sky by Greeks and stuff like that. You have to remember the origin of these things. This is a constellation that was named by Greeks, and there's Greek myth behind it. That's what people should look at. You can't just pull one myth out of another one and put another one there and say, explain this story from this culture in this paradigm. But the thing I want people to understand is there's also an archetype with Vedic Rashis. They're not just based on this astronomical imperative either. In fact, they're incredibly archetypal because they relate the planets to literally the chakra system, the energetic system in our body as well. It's how we experience the grahas, the planets, in our mind, in our psychology. The grahas, the planets, are the spiritual forces of wisdom and knowledge, and vidya, as it's called. They give the vidya. Jupiter gives the intelligence and activates the quality of teaching. Venus activates and rules and initiates the quality of love, beauty, devotion, happiness, and we understand and experience that in our mind and our psychology through these signs, the Rashis. The assertive, initiating quality of Venus, we experience through the sign of Libra. So any planet in Libra is going to be ruled by Venus and initiating Venus based on that sign, based on that planet. So Moon and Venus and the heart will be compelled by the initiating quality of Venus to want to initiate contact and have harmonious interactions. This is why we use the integrity of this section of the sky. A planet in Taurus, for instance, let's say Moon in Taurus, will be formulated to receive the quality of Venus, because it's also ruled by Venus, but the feminine quality of Venus, to gather, hold, and feel secure and safe in what feels good, as an example. So there's also an archetype with Vedic sidereal Rashis as well. They're not just based on astronomy either. So for the most part, these two zodiacs exist in many ways peacefully independent of each other. There's no reason to say one is better than the other, one works better than the other. They work perfectly fine for what they are. Something else I'm just going to say, those who study Vedic astrology often have this kind of arrogance about the sidereal zodiac. Oh, well, that's the right one. And this is bogus. I'll tell you this much about some things about the tropical zodiac which are totally superior. Number one, you never hear tropical astrologers argue about the zodiac. Number one, it's astronomically correct all the time. We always know when the sun changes direction. That's the first moment of Capricorn, and it's solid and right all the time. All these cardinal points, we know exactly when they happen. Vedic astrology, and again, most students don't know how this comes about. They just say, oh, that's the Ayanamsha, that's the calculation. But where exactly do you calculate the exact 0 point of Aries? Beyond the archetype I just explained, it has to make sense, structurally, mechanically. Where exactly is the 0 point of Aries? Because we have to find out where exactly this sidereal zodiac is. Where do these signs actually start? And it's complicated, confusing, and a subject of debate. There are texts that explain certain star positions and give indications. Like there's a text, frankly, I'm sorry, it eludes me right now which astronomical text it is. It might be, I think it might be Srimad Bhagavatam, might not even be astronomical. It might be one of the spiritual texts. There's indications in many texts that explain, like, the star Chitra, or what we would call Spica, the big red star, exists at the halfway point of Chitra Nakshatra. Okay, so this is one of the biggest ways that we calculate the sidereal zodiac. The point opposite Chitra is 0 Aries, because Chitra exists. The middle point of Chitra would be 0 Libra. That's the middle point, because Chitra exists 640 Virgo to 640 Libra. So the middle point is actually 0 Libra. So if the star, it says the star Chitra, but what we would call Spica exists right in the middle of that nakshatra. So if that's in the middle, then we have to measure directly opposite that star and that's 0 Aries. This is one way. But the same text will tell you that, for instance, Regulus exists here. And they're not right. They're off by a little bit. Maybe by a degree or so. So which one do you trust? The same one will tell you that another star exists here and it's not quite right. It's a little off. So how do you do it? How do you figure it out? So Vedic astrology students need to realize something. You got to come off your pedestal, because there's a lot of debate about these things, because it's just not clear. Once you get away from the absolute certainty and integrity of the Earth-Sun relationship in establishing the cardinal points and exactly when energy shifts, then you bring in a whole different issue with the zodiac. And again, this archetypal tropical zodiac works well. It's very elegant for what it does. In its system, it's fine. That's not what we use in Vedic astrology. So then, if we're going to say we're not going to use that, we're going to calculate based on the stars, then we need good, precise calculations. Having said that, I need to go back now and say, you hear this criticism leveled from Western tropical astrologers against the Vedic system, saying, well, yeah, they say theirs is the most solid because it hasn't changed for thousands of years, but no two Vedic astrologers can agree about the Aya Numsha, which is the portion. That's not exactly true. We do pretty much agree. The reason we are sticklers, at least if someone is a good Vedic astrologer, they're going to be sticklers about exactly where that is, because it illuminates enormous predictive power. It's not just because it's sloppy. I mean, what we argue about, the Vedic astrologers rather, is usually microseconds of arc. We're pretty much right on it. We know pretty much exactly where it is. The Lahiri Aya Numsha is really, really close. Somewhere around there is the exact point. But what I'm saying is that because Vedic astrology has so many precise measuring systems and a level of accuracy that, frankly, on the surface is not really in Vedic Western astrology, as far as 16 harmonic charts and an incredibly precise timing system called the Dasha system. This is why we work so hard and try to drill down to the exact specific time. The exact specific Aya Numsha. Because once we do, what it does is it sets in motion an incredibly precise system, just snaps into place. All of these harmonic charts go bang. They line up perfectly. All of the dashas just go bang, line up perfectly. And by the way, people should realize, students especially, who just get all tangled up about this issue, where exactly is the Aya Numsha? Because I use one that's a little different, that's based on the astronomy of the galactic plane and whatnot. Or they'll say, this astrologer rectified my time to be this way or that. What you're saying there is often not even that important, because what I would do, even if my calculation of the Aya Numsha is a little different than another astrologer, I can rectify and get that time. I can tweak the time based on the events in your life to adjust for the Aya Numsha offset anyway. So even if we're disagreeing a little bit about which microsecond of arc the Aya Numsha falls on, it's easily compensated for when a professional astrologer, you can see, because one of the harmonic charts is not going to line up right, and you can just adjust it very quickly, and then everything snaps into place anyway. So these are levels of nuance that people should understand. Tropical astrologers should also understand, even though it looks like Vedic astrologers are always arguing about the Aya Numsha, as a point of functional integrity, it's irrelevant by the time I start to do my work. I look at the time, and I easily adjust for anything that might have crept in due to Aya Numsha or birth time. By the time you get to someone's birth time anyway, that's more sloppy than the Aya Numsha usually. I'm usually calculating and adjusting based on the sloppy birth time, not on the the microseconds of arc that's off in the eye nuptia. You see, that gets absorbed in the professional workings of the astrologer anyway. By the time you understand these things at that level, the issue pretty much goes away to some extent. If that doesn't make sense to you, then forget it. But this is for people that are trying to understand these questions. For the most part, to sum that up, Vedic astrology students especially, and astrologers, most astrologers don't have an arrogance about it. They understand, they know it works. Even most Western astrologers, they're fine. They understand how Vedic astrology, both systems have their own integrity. After a while, we realize it because we've all talked to each other. I've talked to Western astrologers that just, they look at, my chart or whatever, and they just nail it. I mean, they know what they're doing. This works. If your heart is connected to the integrity of that, if your heart is more in harmony with the earth going around the sun and the archetypal relationship and all of the precision and beauty of Western astrology that comes later with progressions and the accuracy with their angles and all their aspects, you're going to nail it. You're going to kick butt. And the outer planets and all the stuff Western astrologers use, it's beautiful. At the same token, if your heart resonates with the sidereal zodiac and nakshatras and all the harmonic charts and all that stuff and the deities and all the stuff that we do that I just explained, and that's really where you're at, you're going to nail it. I'll tell you this too. I find more confusion on Vedic astrology students than Western astrology students because Vedic astrology does not have a very friendly learning curve. It's very hard to do Vedic astrology at a high level at first. Western astrology is much easier to start doing. In fact, it's much more user-friendly. Because it's more archetypal based, it's also more maybe psychological based and other things, it's much easier to start doing. Vedic astrology doesn't start working until you've done it at a high level. You need to understand a lot of different things, and the Vedic astrology student starts getting all this detail, and it's hard to know how to filter through it and how to, first of all, switch from a zodiac that you're not used to initially, because as far as Westerners go, we grow up thinking, oh, I'm a Cancer, and then we start learning and oh, you mean I'm actually a Gemini and this zodiac is wrong? And frankly, some Vedic astrology teachers don't really teach it very well, and this whole kind of, no, it's wrong, it's not really this, it's really that. And so Vedic astrology students have a tendency to project their misunderstandings onto Western astrology a lot more, I think. So you have to realize these things work. They work really well. The tropical zodiac, that is. And the Vedic, or I should say the sidereal and Vedic astrology has so many deeper layers initially, like the planets as house rulers and all of these other things, these very abstract concepts that can be overwhelming. So you should realize that, both systems have a lot of elegance and beauty. Now, one more thing, I didn't talk about this yet, Makar Sankranti, if you're still with me. This is an example of how the Vedic system is, in my opinion, and I think it's kind of obvious, making a mistake with something that is somewhat sacred. And, this is something where some Vedic purists might really not like me saying this, but I have to be honest, I think this is a mistake. Makar Sankranti literally means the ingress of the sun into Capricorn. It was just celebrated last week, like I said, concurrent to this whole Ophiucus thing going on. Like the same days we were having Makar Sankranti, which is, in my opinion, an obvious mistake of the zodiacs. And here's why. Just like in Western tropical astrology, the important cardinal points, the cardinal shifts happen on 0 Capricorn and 0 Cancer. That's the first day of winter, first day of summer. That's when the sun changes directions in the sky. The same was true, in Vedic literature. There are all kinds of references to the northern course, when the sun goes on the northern course. Why? Because the northern course is the realm of the Devas. The northern course is from here, this is north, when the sun is going north. This is the northern course from, say, 0 Capricorn to 0 Cancer. It's easier represented by the seasonal zodiac because we know it. But when we have the winter solstice is when, again, the sun changes direction, moving from south to north. North. So the northern course is from 0 Capricorn to 0 Cancer is when it switches and starts to go south. This is the south. The northern course is the realm of the devas, the gods, heaven, the higher faculties, the higher consciousness. And the southern course is related to the realm of the asuras, dark forces, underground hidden forces. None is better than the other. They're both necessary here on Earth. We have this realm of duality. However, we also, when we identify our purpose here, we choose the northern course. We're always trying to choose the righteous course. All of us. Whether we know it or not, that's what it is. That's just the Vedic language for it. Like all ancient cultures, they were intimately connected to the rhythms of the universe. And when they talk about the northern course, that's what they're talking about, when the sun changes direction. This is a tropical reality. It has nothing to do with the sidereal zodiac. It doesn't. It can't. It's based on the Earth going around the sun. That's when the sun begins the northern course, not when it hits Makar Rashi. Makar is a tropical, Makar is a Rashi in a sidereal, if you're using sidereal zodiac, it's not connected to the northern course. Okay, because now, when the sun changes direction, according to sidereal zodiac, like I was talking about a few weeks ago, the sun is in Sagittarius, not Capricorn. But when these things were written, the sun was in Capricorn. They were written at the time when the two zodiacs were together. There's a lot of confusion around this, and this is why there's debates. Which came first? Who knows? But the point is, Makar Sankranti is obviously a reference to the winter solstice, when the sun moves north. There are stories of the great hero in the Mahabharata, Bhishma, lying on a bed of arrows, waiting for the northern course, waiting for the winter solstice, waiting for the sun to change direction. And it's still celebrated as that type of energy. Return of the light is what it's called. I mean, that's the basic kind of nature of Makar Sankranti, is return of the light, which is literally the same thing as the winter solstice. The fact that it's given the same name, that it exists when the sun goes into sidereal Capricorn rather than tropical Capricorn, shows that this must be some mistake. It's a mistake of the interpretation. It's something else that people should know, especially Vedic astrology students. You should know this before you start saying, oh, here's the other thing you hear. Western astrology forgot and have been making a mistake for thousands of years. This is not the case. In Western astrology books, the old books, Ptolemy, and all through history, they knew the precession. They adjust for the precession, and it's the Vedic astrology books that have the mistake. And it's there. Vedic astrologers in Yavana Jataka, Brihat Jataka in particular, have contradictions. And it was clear that the Vedic people lost knowledge, functioning knowledge of the precession. Because in these books, for instance, it will say the zodiac starts with it starts with Ashwini. Okay? Starts with Ashwini. And then later in the book it says the solstices happen in Cancer and Capricorn. This can't exist. These two statements cannot coexist. If it begins with Ashwini, that's the sidereal zodiac. 0 Aries is the nakshatra of Ashwini. That's a sidereal placement. So if you're saying the zodiac begins with Ashwini, then you can't say that the summer solstice starts with Cancer and winter solstice starts with Capricorn. Because that's going to change. That's a product of precession. But this is exactly what it says in books written around the Dark Ages. Brihat Jataka, Yavana Jataka. And it shows that at the time, they thought that Makar Sankranti was going to happen on the winter solstice. And it doesn't happen anymore on the winter solstice. At the time it did, but they clearly lost knowledge of the precession because these contradictions are in the astrology books. You should understand this. It doesn't mean that We're not supposed to use sidereal zodiac. There are some astrologers who've gone way overboard and say, oh, that proves we're supposed to use tropical zodiac and all. It doesn't prove it. Because there are many references to the Rashis and the Nakshatras being part of the same section. But there are definitely seasonal implications in all of the Vedic rituals because this is the world we live on. This is the world we live in. Just like Vedic holidays are not tied to the Gregorian calendar, has nothing to do with the Gregorian calendar. It has to do usually with the relationship of the sun and the moon. Pretty much always. Makar Sankranti is one of the only ones that's based on the relationship of the earth to the sun. Sankranti, they happen all the time when the solar ingress into the sidereal sign, the sidereal sign, the sidereal ingress into the sun's ingress into the sidereal Rashi is called Sankranti. So when the sun enters sidereal Aries, that's called Mesha Sankranti. When it enters sidereal Taurus, it's called Vrishabha Sankranti. They don't even mention them really. The only one they mention is Makar Sankranti. And it's glorified in many places. And in fact, like I said, even in the Vedic astrology books then, they said, or they talked about how the northern course, or the sun beginning the northern course, happens in Makar. And it doesn't, using sidereal zodiac. So there's clearly times when we're supposed to use the tropical placements. Most of the Vedic rituals, like I said, most of the Vedic seasons and holidays are based on the Earth-Sun, on the Sun-Moon relationship. So the first lunar day we have Navaratri, and the 14th lunar day we have Shivaratri, and all of these things. But that's related to the sun to the moon, which is soul and consciousness, soul and mind. But they only mention Makar Sankranti as the sun entering Rashis, and this is the one they mention, and it's clearly going to be, in my opinion, it's a clear mistake, astronomical mistake, and they lost knowledge of it because it's in the books. The contradictions are there. So I don't want this to get too abstract, but these two things happening concurrent with each other, bringing these zodiacs into question, happened like right within a couple days of each other. Most people in the West didn't know about the Makar Sankranti thing, but that also came and brings a lot of, there's a lot of confusion about it, I think, in the Hindu world. And of course, the government of India and whatnot, they do it based on the sidereal zodiac, but they don't know anything about astronomy. They don't know anything about the seasons. So this is clearly where we're supposed to use seasonal zodiac. The seasonal zodiac is really important, and we should pay attention to it. So I'm going to say one more thing, because this astronomy is really important. Like I said when we had the December 21st eclipse, December 21st, 2010, the sun was here. The earth was here. This is a visual alignment, by the way. The galactic plane runs, it's a wide, we don't know exactly how wide, but it's about 400 or 500 light years wide. So when the earth gets in within a few days of the actual galactic equator, it's in the plane of the galaxy. So now, based on the precession, what we see, the energy that comes to the earth most directly, that's what this represents. That's what this diagram represents. So on December 21st, 2010, the earth was here, and the alignment was lined up with the sun going back into the plane of the galaxy, and that's when we had the solstice as well. This is why all these great shifts are happening now, and it coincides with the Mayan calendar and the 2012 prophecies. And as you see, since then, the sun has moved here, and now when we look visually, we see it's about 0 Capricorn, because we just had this Makar Sankranti based on the sidereal zodiac. So this is the difference this is how long it takes for one zodiac to catch up with the other one. And then it's going to keep going, and then when it hits here, we're going to have the spring, vernal equinox, and then it keeps going. Then here, on the earth going around the sun, we have the summer solstice. So I drew this diagram so you can put yourself in have a bird's eye view, like some altitude, to see what's really going on. Try to visualize this. Get your mind out of just the kind of flat earth mentality and perceive this is what's going on, this amazing mandala of energy. And this, the solar system as this beautiful mandala of energy is what the tropical zodiac is related to. The sidereal zodiac is related to something even more galactic. Not like it's better, but it's a bigger view. It's not just the solar system as a mandala of energy, but it's the universe or the galaxy, our galactic altitude. It gets sort of some galactic altitude looking at our solar system in there, but then its relationship to these other, the divine beings of light, the deities of all these nakshatras, and also how the planets themselves are expressed through these different rashis and signs. So, you know, this is how we would see, like, the sun is the Earth, sun, and moon. This is literally where the moon is now. The moon is in sidereal Gemini, about right here. So this is what we would see in the sky right now. Literally, if we were to look at it, we were to look down, we'd see the sun here. This is the center of the galaxy. This is the galactic core. You know, the big bulge of stars at the center of the galaxy is here. The plane of the galaxy runs here. The sun is one of the stars on the plane of the galaxy. The Earth is going around it this way. And so, again, when it hit here, we had the eclipse on the solstice. And now, and at that time also, you know, the Earth was here. Earth was here, and the moon was here. What's up with these pens? So, yeah, this was on December 21st, 2010. Earth was here, and moon was here. So all of them lined up. That's why I said unprecedented event. Now, the Earth has moved on, and the moon has been going around. It's almost a month later, and we're about to have another full moon, right? So we're about to have another full moon, but this time the full moon is going to happen over here with the moon actually in very early Cancer. And see, the last one we had was here with the sun this way, and then that was when the Earth was here. Then we had the full moon here. Then the Earth keeps going, and then the next time the moon goes around the Earth, the full moon is going to be over here. So as the moon goes like about right here, then we're going to have the full moon over here. So this is how it keeps working all the time. The sun-moon relationship. And these tropical signs, or these 30-degree portions, I'll say this last thing. The reason we have 12 of them, which is, I guess, is really important because this 13th sign, the reason the 13th sign is somewhat not relevant to the system we use is because 12 sun signs, they're actually related to the sun, or the sections of the sky. They're related to the sun because it's how far the Earth goes around the sun in one lunar cycle. It relates sun, moon, and Earth. Just like the last time, we had the moon here, or we had the Earth here, and the moon was here. 30 days later, the sun moves in relative to what we see. The sun moves an astrology sign, and we have another full moon. Then, relative to where we are, because of the Earth going around the sun keeps moving, but the sun is not moving. It's a relative motion, but it shows how far the Earth goes around the sun in one lunar cycle, one synodic cycle, from new moon to new moon. So, from new moon to new moon, which would be, like the next new moon will happen when we're about right here. If I can draw this pen. The next new moon will happen, I guess, maybe we'll have the Earth here, and then the moon will be like here. This is what it looks like when we have a new moon. From our vantage point, moon and sun are lined up at the same point. The moon sort of disappears in the sky. This begins a cycle. It's like masculine and feminine, sperm meets egg. All the metaphors you can imagine, masculine and feminine, sperm meets egg, life force begins, life starts from zero because the moon is dark at that point. And then we have a 30-day cycle. It comes all the way around, and then by the next time it completes, the next time it's new, the sun is then, or the Earth is then moved here. We have the next one, boom. And then it starts again, and then boom. So these signs, whether they're tropical signs or sidereal signs, are related to how far the sun moves in one lunar cycle. This is why you have 12 of them, and approximately 12 lunar cycles, because a lunar cycle is approximately 30 days. So again, at the end of the year, that's why we have a leap year every 5 years, every 4 years, because there's 5 days kind of hanging in limbo. Nothing is exactly precise like that, but there are also other ways to make the calendar. Mayans use the number 13, but this isn't a Mayan system. So again, some people are like, well, what about the 13 of the Mayan system? That's fine, but this isn't a Mayan constellation. Again, this issue with Ophiucus is just shows confusion. So that's why I didn't even spend that much time talking about it, because it's an astronomer trying to sort of debunk astrology, and it's an old game. But it gives us an opportunity to understand what's really happening, and it reveals how much we really do understand. If you look in the Mayan system, they have 13 constellations. You can't throw Ophiucus in the middle of the Western constellational scheme. It has nothing to do with it. It's not what it's based on. So anyway, this has gotten a little long, and I hope I made these concepts easy for you. It's kind of hard to, tell whether or not I kind of lost you or not, but I hope you enjoyed it. Make some comments and let people know if you think this was interesting.